Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to talk to you on this hugely important topic. I know that the foreign minister wanted to be here himself, but I think it's good both for you and for us that he is where he is, fighting the good fight at the budget conference for the government. There is a growing recognition of the importance of infrastructure and the role of private sector to foster development, to create growth, and to fight poverty. The world today is changing fast. Economic and political power is shifting east and south. 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies are in Africa. Since 1990, 700 million people have found their way out of extreme poverty, a remarkable achievement. But the job is not done yet. As long as there are still more than 1 billion extremely poor people on this planet, we cannot lean back. The number one goal for our development policy is to complete the task of eradicating extreme poverty. Poverty prevents people from living meaningful lives and taking responsibility for their families. It also causes conflict, crime, migration, and enormous health and environmental problems. For the first time in history, we see a real chance that humanity can free itself from extreme poverty. More countries than ever before take the step from being developing countries to being middle-income countries. And we know quite a lot about what it takes to take that step. To eradicate poverty, we have to use the instruments that we know work best. Development aid is still important and is still going to be important. But there can be no sustainable growth without policies to allow companies and individuals to create jobs and develop vibrant societies themselves. We must invest in growth that lasts. Woodrow Wilson famously said, "The world must be made safe for democracy." This is just as true today as it was 97 years ago. Good governance is vital for human dignity and human enterprise, and it is vital for economic growth. Promotion of human rights and good governance will be at the heart of our government's development agenda. Development aid cannot compensate for bad policies, but should be used to strengthen positive local changes. And let me add, the world must be made safe for trade too. The real value of world trade has increased 8-fold since 1970, 8 times bigger. This level of growth is unprecedented in history. It has reinforced the interdependence of nations and our common destiny. Increased trade means more growth, more jobs, and less poverty. In fact, most of the recent economic growth has taken place in countries that have increased their trade with other countries. Creating jobs is a more effective measure against poverty than transferring money. 9 out of 10 jobs in developing countries are in the private sector. If we are to be successful in the fight against poverty, we must take the consequence of this fact. Trade and business development. This is where we find the most effective instruments in combating poverty. This is why we are redoubling our support for business development and private investment. This is why we are promoting the prerequisites, the catalysts for sustainable development, good governance, the rule of law, health, education, and not the least, vital infrastructure. This is why we intend to trade more with poor countries. We will help others to create lasting growth themselves and encourage them to shoulder their responsibility to do so. Without small and medium-sized enterprises in a strong private sector, there cannot be any growth. Developing countries themselves must take the necessary steps that will allow them to become middle-income countries. But we will support and encourage the necessary policy changes and reward those that make them. In many poor countries, the public sector is not in a position to make the necessary investments. Therefore, the private sector has a key role to play in providing capital, technology, and expertise. Companies that make money, reinvest, and create jobs are at the front line in the war against poverty. Our support should therefore help countries to attract investments and foster robust businesses. This means that our development aid should act as a catalyst for private sector development. Our aim is to encourage our partner countries to make the necessary changes. The world must be made safe for education so that girls and boys can take their destinies into their own hands, find meaningful work, and create jobs for others. This government will double its support for education. The world must also be made safe for investment. The availability of risk capital for investment in private business activities in development countries is crucial. In other words, we must help others to take risk so that risk can be reduced. This is what Norfund does. Norfund provides risk capital and is a key instrument for private sector development in Norway's development aid. You are additional and catalytic in mobilizing private sector investments, including Norwegian private capital. The strategy focuses on energy, financial institutions, and agribusiness. Norfund's investments are designed to unleash investments from others. In a nutshell, this is also the aim of the government's investment in development, helping others to create growth by enhancing their ability to create jobs and helping to trigger investments from others. Norwegian aid today is fragmented. 116 countries receive aid. We will reduce the number of partner countries and strengthen partnerships with countries where we do the most. We will strengthen our efforts to simplify and improve management of aid, and we will focus more on results. As we change pace in our development cooperation, we are also stepping up our economic diplomacy. Global growth and growth in global demand is primarily taking place in markets that are more complex than those of our traditional trading partners. Norwegian companies are entering new markets presenting them with new and unfamiliar challenges. Extra effort on the part of the Foreign Service will be required to address this. We step up the pace of our efforts to promote Norwegian business interests internationally. We strengthen our diplomatic presence in emerging economies. Norwegian industry has competence and skills that are in demand globally, not the least within the renewable energy and climate sector. Norwegian companies has a total of 250,000 jobs abroad, and that is comparable to Norwegian industry onshore. One of the most essential foundations for growth and development, one of the catalysts, is infrastructure. Without investments in infrastructure, no country can deliver sustainable economic growth. Infrastructure attracts new investments and allow people to find their way out of poverty. Access to infrastructure is directly linked to the ability to raise incomes, to increase job creation, trade, investments, and food security. Access to energy, transport facilities, water, and technology has been key to all the economic success stories we have heard over the last decades. Energy demand will continue to increase globally. For Norway, energy supply and securing access to energy for the world's poor has been a priority for a long time. The Sustainable Energy for All initiative is a prominent example. Investments in renewable energy will need to be scaled up in the coming years in order to support the broader development, economic, and climate agenda. Sustainable growth in emerging markets require sustainable investments in energy infrastructure. Statkraft and Norfund have a long-standing cooperation through SM Power investing in renewable energy. Poverty reduction is the overarching purpose of the Norwegian development policy. We strongly support the process of formulating the post-2015 development agenda. This will be the main reference point for future development policy. In our new approach to development, we will maintain aid at a high level, but at the same time, we sharpen the tools that we know work the best. We do this knowing that in 1990, 50% of capital inflow in developing countries came from foreign aid. 50% in 1990. 20 years later, only 13% come from aid. Today, 50% of capital inflow come from foreign investments. We strengthen the catalytic role of aid in promoting trade, private sector, and investments. Our support shall stimulate necessary transformation in our partner countries and be complementary to national strategies and efforts, not replace them. We are now in the process of preparing white papers both on globalization and trade and on private sector's role in development. We are creating a development policy for the future, and we want your input in this process. I wish you fruitful discussions today, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Bård. We're very happy, Norfund, to have such a supportive owner in the ministry. And I'm also very happy that Bård connected our work with poverty reduction, because that's our mandate. That's what we're here about. And even though we talk about investments and different private sectors, it's all about poverty reduction. That's in our mission. And also, without knowing, you weren't here last year, but the topic then was jobs.
Yes.
And you also had that tied in the beginning. It's all about jobs, and that's the main driver for our work.
The different parts are linked together, and the private sector's investments, creating jobs, well, ends up fighting poverty.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Thank you very much again. Thank you.